My beloved brothers and sisters, what if I told you that there are words so light on the tongue, yet so heavy on the scale of deeds? What if I told you that there is something you can say 3 times a day, not expensive, not complicated, yet powerful enough to change your life? We live in a world where people run after connections, wealth, shortcuts, and guarantees, but the believer runs to Allah. Today, we are not talking about superstition. We are not talking about wishful thinking. We are talking about a spiritual habit rooted in faith, sincerity, and trust that can open doors no human being can open. So listen carefully, because this message is not just to be heard, it is to be lived. The power of consistent dhikr, the remembrance of Allah, is one of the greatest spiritual realities that transforms a believer's life from within. Dhikr is not merely the movement of the tongue, it is the awakening of the heart, the nourishment of the soul, and the strengthening of faith. When a person remembers Allah regularly, something profound happens inside them. Their worries begin to settle, their fears lose strength, and their heart finds a sense of peace that no material possession can ever provide. This is because the human heart was created with an emptiness that only the remembrance of its creator can fill. Wealth may distract it, status may entertain it, and relationships may comfort it temporarily, but none of these can anchor the heart the way dhikr does. Consistency in dhikr is what gives it power. Saying a word once or twice is beneficial, but when remembrance becomes a habit, it reshapes the believer's entire outlook on life. When the tongue becomes accustomed to remembering Allah daily, the heart follows. Over time, the heart begins to turn to Allah instinctively in moments of ease and hardship alike. This is when dhikr stops being something you do and becomes something you are. You no longer remember Allah only after something goes wrong. You remember Him before, during, and after every moment of your life. Allah Himself highlights the importance of remembrance by connecting it directly to inner peace. The heart is constantly exposed to anxiety, comparison, fear of the future, and regret over the past. These are diseases of the heart that grow stronger in silence and neglect. Dhikr works like spiritual medicine. Every time a believer says Subhanallah, they are reminded that Allah is perfect and free from all flaws. Every time they say Alhamdulillah, they acknowledge that whatever they have is a blessing, even if it feels small. Every time they say Allahu Akbar, the problems that once seemed huge begin to shrink because Allah is greater than everything that troubles them. One of the most beautiful aspects of consistent dhikr is that it keeps a believer connected to Allah even when life becomes overwhelming. There are moments when a person does not know what to say in dua. The pain is deep, the confusion is heavy, and words feel insufficient. In those moments, simple remembrance becomes a lifeline. Repeating a short phrase with sincerity can calm a storm within seconds. The believer may not see an immediate change in their circumstances, but they feel a change in their strength to face those circumstances. This inner strength is one of the greatest gifts of dhikr. Consistency in remembrance also builds trust in Allah. When a believer remembers Allah daily, they begin to recognize His presence in every aspect of their life. They start to see that nothing happens randomly. The delays, the obstacles, and even the losses begin to make sense within the larger picture of divine wisdom. Dhikr trains the heart to rely on Allah rather than panic when things do not go according to plan. It reminds the believer that Allah is in control, that He sees what they cannot see, and that His plan is always better than human expectations. Another powerful effect of consistent dhikr is its ability to purify the heart. The heart accumulates spiritual dirt through sins, negligence, and excessive attachment to the world. When the heart is dirty, it becomes hard, unresponsive, and distant from Allah. Dhikr polishes the heart. Each word of remembrance wipes away layers of darkness and replaces them with light. Over time, the believer becomes more sensitive to sin, more conscious of their actions, and more eager to please Allah. This purification does not happen overnight, but with consistency, the transformation is undeniable. Dhikr also plays a crucial role in strengthening patience. Many people struggle not because they lack faith, but because they lack endurance. They want immediate results, quick answers, and instant relief. Consistent remembrance teaches the heart to wait with trust. When a believer repeats words of remembrance daily, they are constantly reminding themselves that Allah's timing is perfect. This repetition reinforces patience in the heart until it becomes natural. The believer learns to wait without despair, to strive without losing hope, and to accept outcomes without resentment. The power of Dhikr is also evident in how it protects a believer from despair and negativity. In a world filled with bad news, comparisons, and constant pressure, the mind can easily fall into hopelessness. Dhikr interrupts these negative cycles. When the tongue is busy remembering Allah, the mind has less space to dwell on destructive thoughts. This is why remembrance is often described as a shield. It guards the heart against whispers, doubts, and excessive fear. A heart that remembers Allah regularly is harder to break, even when tested. Consistency in Dhikr also brings clarity to decision making. When a believer keeps their heart connected to Allah through remembrance, they develop a heightened sense of awareness. They begin to feel uneasy about things that are harmful and at peace with things that are beneficial. This inner compass is a result of a heart that is alive with Dhikr. Such a person may still make mistakes, but they are quicker to recognize them and return to Allah. Their conscience remains awake, guided by remembrance. Another remarkable impact of consistent Dhikr is gratitude. A person who remembers Allah often is constantly reminded of His blessings. Even in difficulty, they can identify something to be thankful for. Gratitude changes how a believer experiences life. Instead of focusing on what is missing, they appreciate what is present. This does not mean they ignore pain or struggle. Rather, they face it with a heart that acknowledges Allah's mercy alongside the hardship. Gratitude, born from Dhikr, attracts more blessings because Allah promises increase to those who are thankful. Dhikr also has a powerful effect on a believer's relationship with other people. When the heart is soft with remembrance, a person becomes more forgiving, more compassionate, and more patient with others. They are less reactive and less consumed by ego. This is because consistent Dhikr reduces the dominance of the self. The believer becomes more aware of Allah watching them, which influences how they speak, how they respond, and how they treat others. Relationships improve not because people change, but because the believer's heart changes. The beauty of Dhikr lies in its simplicity. It does not require wealth, special knowledge, or perfect conditions. It can be done while walking, working, resting, or waiting. This accessibility is part of its mercy. Allah did not make closeness to Him complicated. He made it available to anyone willing to remember Him. Consistency is not about quantity alone, but about regularity and sincerity. Even a small amount of remembrance done daily with presence is more powerful than large amounts done occasionally without focus. Over time, consistent Dhikr reshapes how a believer views success and failure. Success is no longer defined solely by worldly achievements, and failure is no longer seen as the end. The believer understands that true success is closeness to Allah, and true loss is distance from Him. This perspective brings balance. The believer strives in the world without becoming enslaved by it. They work hard, make plans, and pursue goals, but their heart remains anchored in remembrance, knowing that outcomes are ultimately in Allah's hands. Dhikr also prepares the believer for trials. When remembrance is consistent during ease, it becomes a source of strength during hardship. A heart trained in Dhikr does not collapse under pressure. It bends, but it does not break. This is because remembrance builds spiritual resilience. It reminds the believer of Allah's past help, His promises, and His mercy. Even when tears fall, hope remains alive. Even when answers seem delayed, trust does not fade. The power of consistent Dhikr is not always loud or dramatic. Often it works quietly, shaping the heart day by day. A person may not notice the change immediately, but others around them will. Their calmness, patience, and faith become evident. They respond differently to stress, speak differently in anger, and carry themselves with a sense of inner stability. This is the unseen work of remembrance, transforming the believer from the inside out. Ultimately, consistent Dhikr is a relationship. It is the servant turning to their Lord repeatedly, acknowledging their dependence and affirming their faith. It is a reminder that no matter how busy life becomes, Allah remains the center. When remembrance becomes consistent, it becomes a source of light that guides the believer through every stage of life. It strengthens faith when it feels weak, revives hope when it feels lost, and anchors the heart when the world feels unstable. This is the true power of remembering Allah consistently. The phrase "say this 3 times a day" is often misunderstood as a shortcut, a formula, or a guarantee that removes effort and struggle from life. In reality, it carries a far deeper meaning rooted in human psychology, spiritual discipline, and divine wisdom. Saying something 3 times a day is not about the number itself alone. It is about training the heart, aligning the mind, and building a conscious relationship with Allah through consistency. When something is repeated regularly, it stops being an occasional act and becomes part of who you are. This is where its true power lies. Human beings are creatures of habit. What we repeat daily shapes our thoughts, our reactions, and our beliefs. When a person repeats words of remembrance 3 times a day, those words begin to settle into the heart. They no longer remain sounds on the tongue. They become reminders that interrupt worry, arrogance, fear, and hopelessness. The heart is constantly influenced by what it hears and repeats. When it hears remembrance consistently, it becomes familiar with turning toward Allah instead of turning toward despair. The instruction to say something 3 times a day also reflects balance. Islam does not burden the believer with what is unrealistic or overwhelming. 3 times is achievable for everyone, regardless of age, schedule, or circumstances. It acknowledges human weakness while still encouraging consistency. A person may forget many things in life, but something repeated daily becomes difficult to ignore. Morning, evening, and moments in between become opportunities to reconnect with Allah, even if only for a few seconds. Another important meaning behind saying something 3 times a day is reinforcement of belief. Faith can fluctuate. Some days the heart feels strong and hopeful. Other days it feels heavy and uncertain. Repetition stabilizes faith. Each time the words are said, the believer is reminding themselves of a truth they may momentarily forget. This repetition is not for Allah's benefit, but for the believers. Allah does not need to be reminded, we do. Repeating remembrance throughout the day anchors the heart to a constant truth in a world of constant change. Saying something 3 times a day also helps a believer pause and reflect. Life moves fast. People rush from one task to another, often without awareness of their inner state. These moments of repetition act like spiritual checkpoints. They invite the believer to stop, even briefly, and realign their intention. In those moments, the heart asks itself, who am I relying on? Where is my trust? What am I seeking? This pause is powerful because it prevents the heart from drifting too far away. The number 3 also signifies emphasis and certainty. When something is repeated, it carries weight. It tells the heart that this message matters. Saying it once may be forgotten, but saying it again and again ingrains its meaning. Over time, the believer does not only say the words during ease, but instinctively turns to them during difficulty. This is when remembrance becomes reflexive rather than forced. There is also a deep connection between repetition and sincerity. When a person says something repeatedly over time, it tests their intention. If the words are empty, they eventually lose meaning and the person stops saying them. But if the heart is sincere, repetition deepens connection. The believer begins to say the words with more presence, more understanding, and more emotion. Each repetition becomes more alive than the last. This gradual deepening is part of the wisdom behind daily repetition. Saying something 3 times a day also teaches patience. Many people want immediate results from their supplications and acts of worship. They want change overnight. Repetition reminds the believer that transformation takes time. Just as physical strength is built through consistent exercise, spiritual strength is built through consistent remembrance. Each repetition may feel small, but together they create lasting change. This teaches the believer to value the process, not just the outcome. Another meaning behind this practice is dependency. When a believer returns to the same words multiple times a day, they are acknowledging their constant need for Allah. It is an admission that one reminder is not enough, that the heart easily forgets, and that guidance is needed repeatedly. This humility is beloved to Allah. It reflects a servant who knows their weakness and turns to their Lord again and again without pride. The practice of saying something 3 times a day also helps cleanse the heart from excessive attachment to outcomes. When a believer repeats words that affirm trust in Allah, they slowly loosen their grip on control. They begin to understand that their role is to ask, to strive, and to trust, while the result belongs to Allah. This understanding reduces anxiety and frustration. The believer learns to do their part sincerely and leave what they cannot control to Allah. There is also a psychological wisdom in this repetition. The mind is heavily influenced by repeated statements. What you tell yourself daily becomes your internal narrative. When a believer repeats words that affirm Allah's sufficiency, mercy, and power, those qualities begin to dominate their thoughts. Fear is replaced with trust, and worry is replaced with hope. This does not mean challenges disappear, but it changes how the believer experiences them. Saying something 3 times a day also creates a sense of spiritual routine. Routine may seem mundane, but it is powerful. It protects faith during times of laziness and distraction. Even when motivation is low, routine carries the believer forward. Over time, this routine becomes a source of comfort. The believer feels incomplete if they miss it, just as one feels uneasy when they miss a daily habit that nourishes them. Another layer of meaning is preparation. When remembrance is practiced regularly during ease, it becomes readily available during hardship. A heart that is accustomed to turning to Allah daily will not struggle to do so when tested. In moments of panic or loss, the familiar words rise naturally to the tongue. This readiness is not accidental, it is the result of consistent repetition. This practice also teaches accountability. When a believer commits to saying something 3 times a day, they become more aware of their spiritual discipline. They begin to notice when they forget, and that awareness itself is a form of growth. It shows that the heart values remembrance. Over time, this accountability strengthens the believer's relationship with Allah, making it more intentional rather than occasional. Saying something 3 times a day also reinforces hope. Each repetition is a reminder that Allah hears, sees, and responds. Even if the answer is delayed, the act of repetition keeps hope alive. It prevents the believer from giving up on supplication. It reminds them that Allah's mercy is vast and His wisdom is perfect, even when they do not understand what is happening. There is also a communal aspect to this practice. When many believers adopt the same habit of daily remembrance, it creates a shared spiritual culture. Hearts become connected through the same words and intentions, even if people are physically distant. This collective remembrance strengthens the Ummah in unseen ways, bringing blessings and protection that may not be immediately visible. The meaning behind saying something 3 times a day ultimately comes down to presence. It is not about counting repetitions mindlessly, but about returning to awareness. Each repetition is an invitation to be present with Allah, even if briefly. In a world that constantly pulls attention away, this practice gently pulls it back. Over time, the believer begins to notice subtle changes. Their reactions soften, their trust deepens, their fear decreases. These changes are not dramatic, but they are real. They are the result of words that were repeated daily, patiently, sincerely. The believer may not even realize when the shift happens, but one day they look back and see that their heart is no longer the same. Saying something 3 times a day is ultimately a reminder that closeness to Allah is built, not rushed. It is nurtured through small, consistent acts rather than rare, intense moments. Each repetition is a step closer, a renewal of intention, and a quiet declaration of faith. Through this simple practice, the believer learns that lasting change does not come from one powerful moment, but from steady, faithful return to Allah throughout the day. Allah loves those who ask Him regularly because asking is a sign of faith, humility, and deep recognition of one's dependence on Him. When a servant raises their hands or turns their heart toward Allah again and again, they are acknowledging a truth that lies at the core of belief, that no one has power except Allah and no one can give except Him. This act of asking is not a burden on Allah, rather it is beloved to Him. Unlike human beings who grow tired of repeated requests, Allah loves to hear His servant return, persist, and rely on Him continuously. Regularly asking Allah keeps the heart alive. A heart that asks Allah often is a heart that has not given up. It has not surrendered to despair or arrogance. It understands that every need, whether small or large, is worthy of being presented to Allah. When a believer asks Allah for guidance, provision, ease, forgiveness, or strength on a daily basis, they are reinforcing their connection with Him. This connection transforms dua from an occasional act into an ongoing relationship. One of the greatest reasons Allah loves those who ask Him regularly is that it reflects humility. Arrogance distances a person from Allah, while humility draws them closer. Asking repeatedly means the servant recognizes their weakness and Allah's greatness. It is an admission that no matter how capable one feels, they are still in need of divine support. This humility is precious in the sight of Allah because it aligns the servant with their true position, dependent, hopeful, and trusting. Regular supplication also shows trust in Allah's mercy. A person who keeps asking Allah believes that Allah hears them, cares for them, and will respond in the best way. This belief itself is an act of worship. Even when answers seem delayed, continuing to ask shows that the servant has not lost confidence in Allah's wisdom. This persistence is a form of faith that Allah values deeply. Allah loves those who ask Him regularly because it keeps them mindful of Him. When a believer asks Allah throughout the day, their awareness of Allah's presence increases. They begin to see life not as a series of random events, but as moments under divine care. Asking Allah before decisions, during hardship, and after blessings keeps the heart connected. This constant awareness protects the believer from heedlessness, which is one of the greatest spiritual dangers. Regularly asking Allah also nurtures patience. When a believer makes dua repeatedly, they learn to wait with hope rather than frustration. They understand that Allah's response is not bound by human timelines. This waiting is not passive, it is filled with trust. The believer continues to strive while leaving the outcome to Allah. This balance between effort and reliance is beloved to Allah. Another reason Allah loves those who ask Him often is that it reflects gratitude. Even when a believer asks for something they do not yet have, they are implicitly acknowledging Allah as the source of all blessings. This recognition fosters gratitude for what is already present. Over time, the believer begins to thank Allah not only for answered prayers, but also for unanswered ones, trusting that Allah's choice is always better. Asking Allah regularly also protects the heart from turning to people excessively. When a person relies too much on others, disappointment is almost inevitable. Human beings are limited, distracted, and imperfect. Allah, however, is always available. When the believer learns to ask Allah first and foremost, they are spared the pain of misplaced expectations. This does not mean they isolate themselves, but it means their ultimate reliance remains with Allah. Allah loves those who ask Him regularly because it keeps hope alive. Life brings trials, losses, and moments of deep uncertainty. In such moments, asking Allah becomes an anchor. It reminds the believer that no situation is beyond Allah's power. Even when the heart feels heavy, the act of asking itself becomes a source of relief. It is a declaration that despair has not won. Regular supplication also refines the believer's desires. When a person asks Allah frequently, they begin to reflect on what they truly want and need. Over time, their requests may change. Worldly desires may become less dominant, while spiritual goals gain importance. The believer begins to ask not only for ease, but for closeness to Allah, contentment, and righteousness. This transformation of priorities is a sign of spiritual growth. Allah's love for those who ask Him regularly is also evident in how dua draws the servant closer even before it is answered. The act of asking softens the heart, increases sincerity, and deepens reliance. Sometimes, the greatest gift of dua is not the answer itself, but the closeness to Allah that develops during the waiting. Allah knows this, and He loves to see His servant in that state of connection. Another profound aspect of asking Allah often is that it reinforces the servant's identity as a believer. A believer is someone who turns to Allah in all states. When a person consistently asks Allah in times of ease, they are less likely to forget Him in times of hardship. This consistency reflects sincerity. It shows that the relationship with Allah is not transactional, but genuine. Regularly asking Allah also brings balance to the heart. It allows the believer to release their worries rather than carrying them alone. Speaking to Allah about fears, hopes, and struggles lightens the emotional burden. This emotional relief is a mercy from Allah. He loves when His servant turns to Him instead of suppressing their pain or seeking harmful escapes. Allah loves those who ask Him regularly because asking is an act of worship in itself. It is not merely a means to an end, it is a form of devotion. Each time a believer makes dua, they are worshipping Allah through hope, humility, and trust. This worship continues even when the answer is not immediate. The believer's persistence turns waiting into worship. Another reason Allah loves frequent supplication is that it strengthens the believer's awareness of accountability. When a person asks Allah for guidance, forgiveness, and protection regularly, they become more conscious of their actions. They strive to align their behavior with their supplications. This self-awareness leads to personal growth and sincerity. Regularly asking Allah also builds resilience. Life will test every believer. Those who are accustomed to turning to Allah through dua face trials differently. They may still feel pain, but they are not broken by it. They know where to turn. This resilience is a direct result of a heart trained to ask Allah consistently. Allah's love for those who ask Him regularly is also reflected in how dua invites mercy into every aspect of life. The believer begins to see Allah's kindness in small details, unexpected ease, and subtle guidance. Even when things do not go as planned, the heart remains calm, trusting that Allah is arranging matters with wisdom. Asking Allah often also teaches sincerity. Over time, the believer becomes more honest in their supplications. They stop using polished words and begin to speak from the heart. This sincerity strengthens the bond between the servant and their Lord. Allah loves sincerity, and He responds to it in ways the servant may not anticipate. Ultimately, Allah loves those who ask Him regularly because it reflects a living, breathing faith. It is a faith that does not fade with time or circumstance. It is renewed daily through supplication. Each request, each whispered prayer, and each hopeful plea is a testimony that the servant believes in Allah's power, mercy, and closeness. This continuous turning toward Allah is beloved to Him, and it is one of the greatest signs of a heart that is truly alive with faith. Timing, wisdom, and Allah's perfect decree are deeply interconnected realities that shape every moment of a believer's life. Nothing happens randomly, and nothing escapes the knowledge, power, or wisdom of Allah. Every delay, every acceleration, every door that opens and every door that closes does so by divine design. Understanding this truth does not come naturally to the human heart, because human beings are impatient by nature. We want answers now, relief now, success now. When things do not happen according to our expectations, we struggle to reconcile our desires with Allah's decree. Yet it is precisely in this struggle that faith is refined and strengthened. Allah's timing is always perfect, even when it feels painful. The believer often looks at the present moment with limited vision, judging situations based on immediate comfort or discomfort. Allah, however, sees the entire journey. He knows what came before, what is happening now, and what will come after. A delay that feels like deprivation may actually be protection. An unanswered supplication may be preparation. A closed door may be steering the believer away from harm they cannot yet see. When Allah delays something, it is not because He has forgotten or ignored the servant, but because His wisdom demands a better moment. One of the greatest challenges for the believer is learning to trust Allah's timing without losing hope. Hope and patience must exist together. Patience without hope becomes despair, and hope without patience becomes frustration. Allah's perfect decree balances both. When a believer understands that Allah is wise in His timing, they learn to wait without resentment. They continue to strive to make dua and to improve themselves, while trusting that Allah will bring the outcome at the right time. Allah's wisdom is often hidden in the unseen. Human beings judge events based on surface-level outcomes, but Allah's wisdom operates at a deeper level. A hardship may shape character, build resilience, or redirect a person towards something better. A success may come later to prevent arrogance or to ensure the believer is ready to handle it responsibly. Allah knows when a person is spiritually, emotionally, and mentally prepared for what they are asking for. Giving something too early can sometimes be more harmful than withholding it. There are moments when the believer feels certain that something is good for them, yet Allah withholds it. This can be deeply painful, especially when the desire is sincere and lawful. In such moments, understanding Allah's wisdom becomes essential. Allah does not deny out of cruelty. He withholds out of mercy. He may be protecting the believer from consequences they cannot foresee, or saving that blessing for a time when it will be more beneficial. What appears as loss may actually be delayed gain. Allah's perfect decree also teaches the believer humility. When things go well, it is easy to assume control and attribute success to personal effort alone. When things go wrong, it is easy to feel defeated or resentful. Recognizing Allah's decree in both ease and hardship keeps the heart balanced. The believer acknowledges effort, but understands that outcomes are not solely in human hands. This humility draws the believer closer to Allah and protects them from pride and despair. Timing also plays a crucial role in shaping the believer's relationship with Allah. When answers are delayed, the believer is given more time to turn to Allah, to ask Him, and to depend on Him. Sometimes the delay itself is the gift, because it strengthens the bond between the servant and their Lord. If everything were given immediately, the heart might not develop depth, reliance, or sincerity. Allah knows what the heart needs, not just what it wants. Allah's wisdom is evident in how different aspects of life unfold together. One event prepares the believer for another. A setback builds skills or awareness that later becomes essential for success. A painful ending creates space for a healthier beginning. These connections often become clear only in hindsight. Looking back, the believer may realize that had things happened earlier or differently, they would not have been able to handle them. Allah's decree weaves these events together with precision. Another important aspect of Allah's timing is that it tests faith. Faith is not only believing when things make sense, it is believing when they do not. When a believer continues to trust Allah despite confusion, that trust becomes a powerful act of worship. Allah loves when His servants trust Him even without seeing immediate results. This trust elevates the believer's spiritual rank and deepens their reliance on Allah. Allah's perfect decree also brings comfort during loss. Loss is one of the most difficult experiences for the human heart. Whether it is the loss of a loved one, an opportunity, or a dream, it can leave the believer questioning why. Understanding that Allah's decree is perfect does not erase the pain, but it gives it meaning. It reminds the believer that Allah is gentle even in hardship and that nothing is taken without wisdom. This understanding helps the believer grieve without losing faith. Timing and wisdom also influence how Allah answers supplications. Every dua is heard, but not every dua is answered in the way or time the servant expects. Allah may delay an answer to increase reward, to protect the believer, or to grant something better. The believer who understands this does not stop making dua. Instead, they refine their intention and continue asking with trust. They understand that Allah's response is always rooted in wisdom, even when it feels different from their request. Allah's decree also reminds the believer that life is temporary and purposeful. Everything that happens is part of a larger plan that leads toward the hereafter. When the believer understands this, they become less attached to immediate outcomes and more focused on long-term growth. Success and failure are both seen as tests. Ease tests gratitude and hardship tests patience. Both are opportunities to draw closer to Allah. Another dimension of Allah's perfect decree is justice. Allah is perfectly just, and nothing goes unnoticed. When a believer experiences injustice, it can be difficult to accept Allah's timing. But trusting in divine justice means believing that Allah will restore rights in the best way and at the best time. This trust prevents the heart from being consumed by bitterness or revenge. It allows the believer to respond with dignity and patience. Allah's wisdom also extends to personal growth. Some lessons can only be learned through waiting, struggling, or experiencing loss. If everything were easy, the believer would not develop strength, gratitude, or depth. Allah's decree shapes character over time. Each experience, whether pleasant or painful, contributes to the believer's development. This gradual shaping is part of Allah's mercy, even when it feels difficult. Understanding Allah's timing also teaches acceptance. Acceptance does not mean giving up effort or ambition. It means making peace with what cannot be changed while continuing to strive within what is possible. The believer learns to distinguish between what they can control and what they must entrust to Allah. This balance brings inner peace. The heart stops fighting reality and starts working with faith. Allah's perfect decree also strengthens hope. When a believer knows that Allah's plan is flawless, they can remain hopeful even in the darkest moments. They trust that relief will come, that ease will follow hardship, and that Allah's promise is true. This hope is not naive. It is grounded in faith in Allah's wisdom and timing. Ultimately, timing, wisdom, and Allah's perfect decree invite the believer to surrender without becoming passive, to trust without becoming careless, and to hope without becoming impatient. This surrender is not weakness, it is strength. It allows the believer to navigate life with faith, resilience, and peace. Even when the path is unclear, the believer walks forward trusting that Allah, in His infinite wisdom, is guiding every step. The tongue is one of the smallest parts of the human body, yet its impact is immense. By Allah's permission, the words spoken by a believer can influence their destiny, shape their mindset, and alter the course of their life. This is not because words themselves possess independent power, but because Allah has placed profound effects within speech when it is combined with sincerity, faith, and reliance upon Him. The tongue becomes a tool through which the heart expresses belief, hope, repentance, and trust, and Allah responds to what emerges from a sincere heart. Every word a person speaks carries weight. Some words bring light, while others bring darkness. Words of remembrance, gratitude, and supplication elevate the soul and invite Allah's mercy. Words of negativity, complaint, and arrogance harden the heart and distance a person from divine help. When a believer learns to guard their tongue and use it for good, they begin to see changes not only within themselves, but also in how life unfolds around them. This transformation happens gradually, but it is real and powerful. By Allah's permission, the tongue can change destiny through dua. Dua is one of the greatest gifts Allah has given to humanity. It allows the servant to ask, to hope, and to seek change. When a believer raises their hands or whispers a sincere prayer, they are not merely speaking into the air. They are turning to the one who controls all affairs. Allah has the power to change circumstances, open closed doors, and ease difficulties. The tongue, when used in dua, becomes a means through which Allah brings about change. The repeated use of the tongue in remembrance also plays a significant role in shaping destiny. When a believer constantly remembers Allah through their speech, their heart becomes aligned with divine guidance. This alignment influences decisions, actions, and reactions. Over time, the believer finds themselves making choices that lead to better outcomes. What appears as a change in destiny is often the result of a heart guided by remembrance, leading the person away from harm and toward goodness. The tongue also has the power to reinforce belief or weaken it. What a person repeatedly says becomes what they begin to believe. When a believer constantly affirms trust in Allah, speaks words of hope, and reminds themselves of Allah's mercy, their faith strengthens. This strengthened faith affects how they face trials. Instead of giving up, they persist. Instead of panicking, they trust. This shift in attitude can completely alter the trajectory of a person's life, by Allah's permission. Another way the tongue can change destiny is through repentance. When a believer uses their tongue to seek forgiveness sincerely, Allah responds with mercy. Sincere repentance can erase sins, soften the heart, and remove obstacles that were placed as consequences of wrongdoing. Many hardships are lifted not because circumstances magically change, but because the believer turns back to Allah with humility. A few sincere words of repentance can open doors that seemed permanently closed. The tongue also influences destiny through gratitude. When a believer uses their tongue to thank Allah consistently, they acknowledge His blessings and express contentment. Gratitude invites increase by Allah's promise. This increase may come in various forms: peace, provision, opportunities, or protection. A grateful tongue attracts divine favor, while a complaining tongue repels it. Over time, the difference becomes evident in the believer's life. The way a believer speaks about their situation also matters. Constantly declaring hopelessness, failure, or despair can trap the heart in negativity. While honesty about pain is important, there is a difference between expressing vulnerability and reinforcing despair. When a believer chooses to speak with hope, even in hardship, they are making a statement of trust in Allah. This trust invites help and ease by Allah's permission. The tongue can also change destiny through positive influence on others. Words of kindness, encouragement, and guidance can impact lives in ways the speaker may never fully realize. A single sincere word can motivate someone, heal emotional wounds, or bring a person closer to Allah. Allah may reward such speech by changing the speaker's destiny in unseen ways. Good words become ongoing charity, continuing to benefit the speaker long after they are spoken. Consistent remembrance through the tongue also protects the believer from harmful paths. When the tongue is busy with dhikr, it is less likely to engage in harmful speech such as gossip, lies, or insults. This protection prevents sins that could bring negative consequences into a person's life. By guarding the tongue, the believer safeguards their destiny from unnecessary hardship. The tongue also plays a role in maintaining hope during waiting. When a believer continues to speak words of supplication and trust while waiting for an answer, they prevent despair from taking root. This perseverance keeps the heart alive and connected to Allah. Allah loves persistence in dua, and through it, He may change the outcome in ways the believer did not expect. The tongue can even change destiny by shaping the believer's inner dialogue. What a person says out loud often becomes what they say to themselves. When the believer trains their tongue to speak positively, with faith and reliance on Allah, their inner thoughts begin to change as well. This inner transformation influences behavior, effort, and resilience, all of which contribute to life outcomes. There is also a powerful connection between the tongue and sincerity. Allah responds to sincerity, not eloquence. A simple, heartfelt plea can be more powerful than many polished words. When the tongue reflects a sincere heart, Allah's mercy is drawn closer. This sincerity is what allows words to have real impact by Allah's permission. The tongue can also change destiny by strengthening relationships. Speaking with wisdom, patience, and kindness preserves bonds and resolves conflicts. Many life difficulties stem from broken relationships and harsh words. When a believer chooses gentle speech, they prevent harm and invite harmony. This harmony affects emotional well-being, family stability, and overall life direction. Ultimately, the tongue is a trust. Allah has given it the ability to express what lies within the heart. When used responsibly and sincerely, it becomes a means of drawing closer to Allah and improving one's condition. By Allah's permission, the tongue can open doors, soften hearts, erase sins, and invite blessings. The believer who understands this does not take speech lightly. They choose words that reflect faith, hope, and trust, knowing that each word spoken can contribute to shaping their destiny in ways only Allah fully knows. Acceptance of supplication and deeds is something every believer longs for, yet it is not detached from responsibility, character, and lifestyle. Allah is most merciful and most generous, but He has also taught us that certain conditions strengthen acceptance and draw a servant closer to His response. Among the most powerful of these are patience, halal living, and trust in Allah. These are not separate qualities, they are deeply connected and work together to shape the believer's inner state and outward actions. Patience is one of the greatest tests of faith. When a believer makes dua or strives in obedience, they naturally hope for quick results. Yet Allah often teaches patience through delay. This delay is not rejection, it is refinement. Patience trains the heart to remain steady even when the outcome is unknown. A patient believer does not abandon supplication when results are slow. Instead, they continue asking with hope, knowing that Allah's timing is perfect. This patience itself becomes a form of worship that raises the believer's rank. True patience is not passive waiting, it is active perseverance. It means continuing to obey Allah even when ease is delayed, continuing to avoid sin even when temptation is strong, and continuing to trust Allah even when the heart feels tired. This form of patience purifies intention. It removes selfish urgency and replaces it with sincere submission. Allah loves this state because it reflects complete reliance upon Him rather than desperation for immediate outcomes. Halal living is another essential condition that strengthens acceptance. What a believer consumes, earns, and engages in affects the heart more than many realize. Halal sustenance nourishes both the body and the soul, while haram consumption darkens the heart and weakens the effect of supplication. When a believer is mindful of earning and consuming only what is lawful, they are showing obedience in the most practical areas of life. This obedience invites Allah's blessings and mercy. Halal living is not limited to food and income alone, it extends to behavior, relationships, and intentions. Speaking truthfully, avoiding oppression, fulfilling trusts, and respecting others are all part of a halal lifestyle. When a believer strives to keep their life clean from what Allah has prohibited, their heart becomes more receptive to guidance. Supplication made from such a heart carries sincerity and humility, making it more likely to be accepted by Allah's permission. Many people ask Allah for blessings while neglecting the means through which blessings flow. Halal living aligns the believer's actions with their supplications. It removes contradictions between what the tongue asks for and what the body practices. When actions and words are in harmony, the heart becomes sincere. This sincerity is beloved to Allah and strengthens acceptance. Trust in Allah completes the circle. Trust is the quiet confidence that Allah knows what is best, even when the outcome is unclear. A believer who truly trusts Allah continues to make dua without anxiety or resentment. They understand that Allah's response may come in a different form than expected. This trust protects the heart from disappointment and keeps it connected to Allah regardless of results. Trust does not mean abandoning effort. It means doing one's best while leaving the outcome to Allah. The believer plans, works, and strives, but does not obsess over control. They accept that some matters are beyond human ability and must be entrusted to Allah. This balance between effort and reliance brings peace to the heart and clarity to the mind. Patience, halal living, and trust work together to shape the believer's relationship with Allah. Patience prevents haste and despair. Halal living removes barriers to acceptance. Trust sustains hope and calmness. When these qualities are present, the believer's supplication becomes an expression of faith rather than a demand. Allah loves when His servants ask with humility and trust, not entitlement. These conditions also protect the believer from giving up. When a person lacks patience, they may stop asking after a short time. When they neglect halal living, they may unknowingly block blessings. When they lack trust, they may become bitter or doubtful. Together, these qualities ensure continuity in worship and supplication, even during long periods of waiting. Patience also teaches gratitude. When a believer waits for something and eventually receives it, they appreciate it more deeply. This gratitude strengthens the relationship with Allah and invites further blessings. Even when the answer does not come in the expected form, patience allows the believer to recognize hidden blessings within the situation. Halal living also brings contentment. A believer who is careful about what they earn and consume develops a sense of peace that cannot be bought. This contentment reduces greed and anxiety, allowing the heart to focus on Allah rather than constant worry about provision. This calmness enhances sincerity in worship and supplication. Trust in Allah helps the believer accept outcomes gracefully. Whether the answer is yes, no, or later, trust keeps the heart steady. The believer does not feel abandoned or forgotten. They understand that Allah's wisdom surpasses human understanding. This acceptance deepens faith and strengthens resilience. These conditions also influence character. A patient person is gentle and resilient. A person committed to halal living is honest and disciplined. A person who trusts Allah is calm and hopeful. Together, these traits shape a believer whose life reflects faith in both words and actions. Such a life naturally attracts Allah's mercy. When these conditions are present, even unanswered supplications become a source of reward. Allah rewards patience, sincerity, and trust regardless of outcomes. The believer gains closeness to Allah, peace of heart, and spiritual growth. These rewards are often greater than the original request. Ultimately, patience, halal living, and trust are not obstacles to acceptance. They are pathways to it. They align the believer's heart, actions, and expectations with Allah's wisdom. Through them, the believer learns that acceptance is not just about receiving what is asked for, but about becoming someone worthy of Allah's mercy. My beloved brothers and sisters, as we come to the end of this reminder, let us return to the heart of the message. Our journey has never been about a magic phrase or a guaranteed shortcut. It has always been about the heart that remembers, the tongue that asks, and the soul that trusts Allah completely. When remembrance becomes consistent, when dua becomes a habit, and when reliance on Allah becomes firm, life itself begins to change, not because we control destiny, but because we place our destiny in the hands of the one who controls everything. We learned that saying words regularly is not about counting repetitions, but about building connection. Allah loves those who ask Him again and again, not because He needs to be reminded, but because we need to return. Delays are not rejections, and silence is not neglect. Every moment unfolds with wisdom, every decree carries mercy, and every outcome is perfectly measured by Allah. What we see as loss may be protection, and what we call delay may be preparation. We learned that the tongue is not small in impact. By Allah's permission, words of remembrance, repentance, gratitude, and hope can reshape hearts, open doors, and change lives. A guarded tongue invites mercy, while a hopeful tongue keeps faith alive even in the darkest moments. And we learned that acceptance is strengthened through patience that does not break, halal living that keeps the heart clean, and trust that remains firm no matter the outcome. So walk forward with hope. Keep your tongue moist with the remembrance of Allah. Ask Him often, trust Him completely, and wait with patience. Do your part sincerely and leave the rest to Allah. Because when a servant turns to Allah with a clean heart, a trusting soul, and unwavering faith, Allah never turns them away. May Allah make us among those who remember Him consistently, ask Him sincerely, trust His decree wholeheartedly, and receive what is best for us in this world and the next. Ameen.